Dobar dan. That means good day in Croatian. With this war with Russia and all the rest of that stuff, maybe it's not my best move to be speaking Croat, huh? But close enough, I guess. Anyway, this is TalkCast PDX on the web at talkcastpdx.com. It's Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. Name of the show is The Bogdanich Perspective. I'm your host, Paul Bogdanich, and welcome. It's episode number 50. I'm going to call it unstable because that's what the situation is. It's real unstable. I'm a member of TalkCast PDX. TalkCast PDX has a lot of lifestyle shows, cooking shows, so on. I broadcast on their YouTube network. I'm subject to YouTube's community standards in terms of what they consider misinformation and things you're not supposed to say. I abide by those. But I'm curious how that'll be expanded in the coming future. A little bit of a war happening. They say that truth is always the first casualty of war. And boy, is it. If you watch the news or social media, there and somebody shows something, this happened today in this city or that happened today, and they always have film, of course. You know, the way our news works, they need film. And people do something called a reverse image search, where if you broadcast an image, they take and they go and they look for the first time that it appeared on the internet. And what you find is that almost universally across social media and even sometimes on the mainstream news, what did they say? We've taken down video after questions were raised about its accuracy. XYZ News regrets the error, as they say. But, substituting footage from places like Syria or Palestine for things that supposedly happened in Ukraine doesn't mean that there's not bad things happening in Ukraine. I'm sure they are. It's just that they're not being reported. And these news people, need footage, so they take some wrong ones. Speaking of which, and they only report what they want. I got some emails from the American Red Cross and saying that and the EU also says 500,000 Ukrainians are refugees in Poland and other EU countries. And they show all these pictures of these refugees, and they say that they need blood and food and stuff like that. And I'm sure, I hope you see them too. And if you do see them, look at them. Look at the pictures. Look at the refugees, okay? Now, look at the pictures they're showing you. Look at the refugees. Where are all the men in between 20 and, say, 60 years old? Reports on the ground are, as they get close to the border, the Ukrainians they take them away forcibly from their families and force them to join the army. The Ukrainian army, obviously. But that's not reported. But when you get these pleas for help, send us food, send us money, send us blood, send us this, send us that. Look at the character of the refugees, and you tell me, where are the men in between 20 and 60 years old? There are none. And it's, truth is the first casualty of war. There was an interview with a CBS News correspondent stationed in some Ukrainian city. And somebody actually asked him one of my favorite questions, what's the material difference in between this and our invasion of Iraq? We're both going in to get weapons that are a threat to us, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, and this is a quote, "This isn't a place, with all due respect, like Afghanistan or Iraq, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's not going to happen," unquote. I wish you had a lot of verbiage. You should have just said, oh, well, the difference is these people are white, rather than Arab. is what he was saying. But very interesting. Anyway, the Chinese foreign ministry briefing, and the woman that's doing the foreign ministry briefing gives the briefing on everything that they consider important, and then they take questions. And like the first 9 questions from 9 different media sources are, what's your opinion of the Russian invasion of Ukraine? And this woman, her name was Ha. HUA is the American spelling. But she said, quote, "Why are you so obsessed with this question? You can ask the U.S. side. They keep fueling fires. You can ask them if they have any plans to put out the fire," unquote. And that's their interpretation, their being the Chinese. It made the news that President Putin of Russia put his nuclear forces on a higher state of alert. The backstory on that is Western politicians, particularly EU, were thinking of sending aircraft or a no-fly zone over Iraq or over Ukraine. And to effectively do that, you would have to attack long-range radar systems that exist within the Soviet Union. So it seems like our Air Force is sane enough not to do that, but we still have the Germans ruled it out, the Czech Republic ruled it out, the EU seems to have ruled it out, but that still leaves some crazies like the British in particular. But in response to that possible development, Putin put his nuclear forces on a higher state of alert. But FEMA, our Federal Emergency Management Agency, has got that covered. They updated some guidance on nuclear explosions, and the updated website says, and I quote, "Nuclear explosions can cause significant damage and casualties from blast, heat, and radiation. Get inside the nearest building to avoid radiation. Brick or concrete is best. Go to the basement or the middle of the building. Try and maintain a distance of at least 6 feet between yourself and people who are not members of your household. If possible, wear a mask," unquote. And that is in terms of a nuclear attack. It's anyway. Truth is the first casualty of war. It's like a duck and cover drill in the 1950s. It's senseless. It's silly beyond imagination. But that's what we're doing. Last episode, I talked about the dialectic of war. I want to repeat that really quickly. In between 2000 BC and whenever today, you've had about 4,000 years, and there's been an average of about 2 wars a year somewhere over the earth. So you have about 8,000 wars to study, and when you do, you can detect certain patterns, and these patterns are what's called the dialectic of war. To quote a Canadian military historian by the name of Gwen Dyer, he says, "One pattern that shows up from the very beginning is that consistently, war will tend to expand beyond the purposes for which it was waged in terms of the damage it does. Once the issue is consigned to a decision by force, then inevitably escalation is the most successful tactic." If you want to sum that up in modern parlance, basically what he's saying is that wars tend to take on a life of their own. And this one is no exception. The same historian also said that fighting foreign wars is God's way of teaching Americans geography. I love that quote, by the way. But so we need to go through a little of the geography to understand what's happening. So, Justin, if you could please put up graph number 1. This is just a basic plot of Europe as it exists today. You can see Ukraine, I think it's in green. I can't see it yet on my screen. I have a little bit of a delay. But, France, Germany, Poland, Romania, Hungary, Ukraine, Belarus, Russia. Yeah, Ukraine's in blue. They're very long border with Russia. That kind of grayish area is the Black Sea. Crimea, which is the peninsula that sticks into the Black Sea, it should be green on this map, but it's not. But that's your map of Europe, and you'll notice that Ukraine has a very long border with Russia and Belarus and the Black Sea, and then it's got a border with essentially Romania and Poland, and very small borders with Slovakia and Hungary. Right, and that's where it sits. It's on Russia's doorstep. If you could take that one down and put up number 2, please, Justin. Now, if you were born or were reading the news or anything like that before 1992, not that long ago, 30 years, the map of Europe used to look like this. Okay. And you'll notice that Ukraine and Belarus aren't even in it because they were just historically part of Russia. And you had, when they ended the Second World War, you can see East Germany, and that's where the Berlin Wall used to be, down on the border of East Germany into Czechoslovakia. But East Germany and Poland and Czechoslovakia, which is now 2 different countries, Slovakia and the Czech Republic, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria were part of what they used to call the Warsaw Pact, which was Soviet-dominated Europe after the Second World War. And that's the way the map used to look from 1945 all the way until 1992, only 30 years ago. In 1949, to counter or to have a military defense essentially for Western Germany or West Germany, we formed an organization called NATO, which stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And its purpose was to put up a defense in case that Soviet bloc there, that they used to call the Warsaw Pact, decided that they wanted to move west, right? In 1992, the Soviet Union dissolved. If you could take down graph number 2 and put up graph number 3, please, Justin. And it returned to the graph number 3, if you could. Okay. And the map returned to this. Now, this one here, all those blue countries are members of NATO, right? If you'll remember, the Soviet bloc dissolved in 1992, and NATO was a military alliance to counter the Soviet bloc. But you'll notice that in between 1992 and today, NATO keeps expanding. Okay. It has Norway in it. And, well, you can see in between 1949, when they founded NATO, and 1989, those were the original, the dark blue were the original members. You had Turkey and Italy and Germany and Belgium and France and Britain and Norway and Spain and Portugal and Iceland for whatever good that does. But those are the original blocks. Then in the 1990s, under Clinton, and by the way, when the Soviet Union dissolved, James Baker, who was the Secretary of State, the President of the United States, Bill Clinton, who was the incoming president, promised the Soviets that if they dissolved, that NATO would not expand, quote, 1 inch to the east. Clinton almost immediately broke his promises, added Hungary, what's now called the Czech Republic, and Poland. And then in the 2000s, we really got ambitious, and we added Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia, Slovenia. Albania, I guess, is that little thing south of Montenegro. And now what our gig is we want to add Ukraine. All right, you can see on this map where it says controlled by Russian-backed separatists in the Donbass region, way over there in the corner of Ukraine. But our whole kick is to make Ukraine one of these blue countries. And if you're a Russian and you're not thinking about this as a political map, but you're looking at it as a military map, if Ukraine is a blue country and it's heavily armed and it's right on your border, it poses a very significant threat. It would be like Moscow or China sending divisions to Mexico. We wouldn't stand it for a second. But we, in our ultimate wisdom, want Ukraine to join NATO. They see it as a direct threat. In military terms, if Ukraine is blue, Belarus, the country just north of Ukraine, in military terms is what's referred to as a pocket. Okay? And Belarus is where the troops always go on invasions from the west to the east to capture Moscow. That was Napoleon's preferred invasion route, one of Hitler's three, or Nazi Germany's three invasion routes, and they always get destroyed. And if Ukraine goes blue, then they're a pocket. And as you can imagine, they have a dog in this fight also. All right. As much as we don't talk about it, Ukraine or Belarus figures that if Ukraine is allowed to join NATO, that essentially they're going to try color revolutions. They're going to try overthrowing the government. They're going to do anything they can. And so Ukraine or Belarus also views the Ukrainian situation as a life or death matter. If you can take down that one and put up number 4, please. So I spoke to you last week, and that was on Tuesday, and on Monday, Putin announced that he was going to recognize the separatist regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. And there's a map of Ukraine, and those were the separatist regions that he recognized as independent countries. The thinking at the time was that, see where it says on this map, Donetsk and Luhansk, those are what are called the administrative districts of Donetsk and Luhansk. And it was pretty broadly assumed that what he was going to do at that time was recognize those two states as independent nations and then expand their borders to the edges of the administrative district of Donetsk and Luhansk. And, we were going out of our minds with the sanctions and, everything else. I would point out that the Ukrainian forces have been committing atrocities, shelling and sniping and laying mines and killing on average probably 24 people a week in Donetsk and Luhansk for the last 8 years. So women, anybody. It's basically a terror campaign by the Ukrainian forces. And so it was assumed that that's what he was going to do. If you can take down number 4 and put up number 5, and that's what everybody thought the situation was last Tuesday when I talked to you. But what he actually did, is number 5 up? Yes, it is. Okay, is this. He attacked on a 1,200-mile front from a line from the Belarus border to the east of Kiev, which is up, the thing up there in the top, all the way down the eastern border of Ukraine, all the way down the Black Sea border, across the Crimean border, and then all the way across to Odessa, which is a port city in that area. And he attacked on a 1,200-mile front. Those blue circles and rectangles and things over there, those are isolated Ukrainian forces. This map is as of the 27th. Those 2 arrows, the ones from the purple area and then the red area north of Mariupol, have closed. And there's Ukrainian troops surrounded in Mariupol. The 2 red areas are close enough together where there's no road escape. And in between those 3 areas there, those blue circles, there's about 50,000 trapped Ukrainian troops. They're predominantly right-wing. They're battalions with Nazi ideology and affiliation are located there. And they're surrounded. And That's interesting. See that little town where it's called Kacharev, Kharkiv, Kacharev there? All the troops north of Kacharev, including the troops that are in and around Kiev up there, the capital of Ukraine, appear to be reservists. They're not ambitious troops trained to kill efficiently and in large numbers. They look to be reservists. They look to have a little bit older equipment, everything to the north of Kacharev. And that's what's called Staatskrieg, which is the opposite of Blitzkrieg, which is the German term for essentially making the continuous front that was born in World War I a moving object. But that's Blitzkrieg. But anyway, the troops in the south, the ones that came out of Crimea that have surrounded Mariupol, have captured, I think it's Odessa, that little blue dot, and then they're performing pretty well. All right. The troops in the purple area that have been fighting the Ukrainians for 8 years are performing pretty well. The battalions south of Kacharev that are going to cut off those Ukrainian forces seem to be performing pretty well. Everybody to the north of that is, it's what we used to call winning hearts and minds in Vietnam. you know, where there's some reports. You can take that down, but the point is he attacked across a 1,250 mile front. When they do win hearts and minds, one of those blue dots to the north and east of Kacharev, small little town, about 30,000 people, and they had them, surrounded and so on, and they drove out the Ukrainian troops. And they talked to the mayor, and the mayor said, fine, let's just get the people fed and all the rest of this stuff. Middle of the night, Ukrainian armed forces show up at his house, murder him in front of his family for being, quote unquote, a collaborator. All right. And these guys are sitting around watching it. You can go on social media and they almost brag about military. There's a military convoy south of Kiev on the rail lines that they're saying is 62 or 64 kilometers long, stacked with Russian equipment. And they brag about that. In military terms, that's appalling. One aircraft or two aircraft destroys all that equipment. There is it's just appalling. They're like reserve battalions. They're doing nothing. Sitting around, there's not even any what's called operational security. They don't prohibit people from taking pictures of this thing on the convoy. Why are they still on the convoy? Justin, if you could put up number 6. I think Putin is a good politician. I think not to offend the Chinese, he did not attack until the Winter Olympics were over. But I think by doing that, what he did is he's the one that's stuck in the mud. He can't do any open field maneuver. All right, so he's got a bunch of reserve battalions. You can take that down. So he's got a bunch of reserve battalions out there in the open. Because they can't do open field maneuver, you can't really space them out appropriately so that one plane can't wipe out all of them. The NATO allies start to talk about, maybe we should give these guys some aircraft. He's got all those troops and equipment concentrated and exposed, so he threatens to go nuclear. And in my view, whatever his merits as a strategist or a politician or as a negotiator or whatever, I served in the military 4 years, 9 months, not unintelligent, used to spend a lot of time with the G2 guys and all the rest of this. He's appalling as a general. This is, they're having problems. All right, we backed him into a corner. We won't even talk to him. Secretary Lavrov was supposed to give a speech at the EU today, and the quote unquote EU delegation walked out, wouldn't even let him speak. All right, so you got a guy that's backed himself into a corner. He's got all these troops exposed in the open. He's the one that's stuck in the mud. All right, and he's backed himself into a corner. Unfortunately, it's a nuclear corner. And it's a problem. As to where do we go from here, Justin, if you could please put up slide number 3 again. No matter how the Russians sort this out, the geography remains the same, okay? The geography is as the geography is. Ukraine cannot be allowed for purposes of Russian security. I mean, Henry Kissinger, we did in Ukraine in 2014, we did a coup, a color revolution. All right, you know what we call one of our color revolutions, like we did all across the Middle East, you know, where we created an opposition figure and had him, you know, come in and win some elections. All right, people came out into the streets to support the old president. There were snipers on the rooftops. All right, this is by, you know, CIA, complicit, killed 80 civilians in the square that were trying to support for the old government. That's when, you know, in 2014, when in response to our coup, that those controlled by Russian separatist areas, you know, said, you just stole our country, we're not being part of it. And that's when that whole thing started. They've been fighting for 8 years, you know, with heavy civilian casualties all across that border. Never makes our news, you know. And so on. Anyway, but in terms of where Belarus sits, in terms of where Ukraine sits, just because of the geography, no other reason. It's open country. All right. Ukraine cannot be allowed to be a NATO state from a Russian perspective. He's currently getting a lot of pressure. All right. Not from his internal security cabinet, but from the Belarusians. All right, the people in Belarus, they want to take an army of Belarus troops, all right, covered by Russian air defenses. All the Belarus guys want are S-400 and S-500 air defenses, and they want to attack from the north and secure the Polish border. You know, come down and attack the western side of the country and secure the Polish border. Because if Ukraine goes blue, they're, you know, I mean, they're done. You know, they're surrounded. Anyway, it's a very bad situation. You can take that down. Belarus has agreed to host Russian nuclear forces. The ground doesn't firm up to the point where you can do open field maneuver until roughly depending on the weather. You know, whether it gets hot and dry, but typically the first week in June. In between now and then, it's a rainy season. It's mud, meters deep mud. You got all these troops and equipment sitting on rail cars. You know, when I was in service, if we had a concentration of troops of equipment stranded on a rail car, it certainly wouldn't be 62 goddamn kilometers long. Excuse me. But our instructions would be to stay the hell away from from that equipment on those rail cars. All right, we'd be living in a perimeter, maybe starting in between 200 yards and going out to 1,000 yards, you know, on all sides of this stranded equipment. All right, because if you have stranded equipment out in the open, somebody's going to hit it with some artillery or a tank shell, or they're going to get in there with a javelin missile or something. All right, and it's just it's a hell of a bad situation. I don't, like I said, you can't trust, what I've showed you is all that I consider verifiable. All the reports are, it's just all lies, all of it. But we do know from the satellite, anyway. So I don't know what's going to happen other than our economic sanctions are, to use a military term, causing collateral damage. You're the collateral damage. I'm the collateral damage in terms of inflation. All right. Ukraine and Russia proper are major grain exporters. They grow probably half the world's wheat. They feed the Middle East, Egypt and Algeria, just all the Middle East where they can't grow food. You have disruption in wheat and grain supplies because of this open field disaster in the mud over there. The inflation is going to become huge. Oil, gas, wheat, copper, cobalt, aluminum. I don't expect, if you could, anyway, to the markets, how is this affecting the market? Here's our chart. September 30th to Monday, February 28th. You can see all your markers on there. Yesterday, the market didn't fall much, but the 2 days before that, which would be Thursday and Friday, on Thursday it gained 1.5%, and then on Friday it gained 2.25%. So it was up whatever that is, 3.75% over 2 days, and that was the Fed buying it back after it bounced off 4,300. Which was the prior cycle low over there in October 4th. So they seem to be defending 4,300. Today, last time I looked, the market was down. It's down 1.25% today. 1.36%, excuse me. It's right now hovering at 4,314. If this goes like Thursday or Friday, the last 20 minutes of trading, the Fed will flood the market with liquidity, and it'll close up 1/4 point, which is what happened yesterday. It was down all day. Last 20 minutes of trading, they close it up. But look at the trend from the prior all-time high set on January 3rd. And then you had that very steep drop in the end of January 27th, which was just Thursday. And then Fed bought it back and so on at 4,300 level. But even then it recovered. But just look at the trend. It's down. And as these bankers figure out the problems that they've created with some of these sanctions and clearing and stuff, I think the trend is down. I think the Fed might, they look to be supporting it at 4,300. But the only thing I'd consider is attractively priced dividend stocks. You can take that down, Justin. Attractively priced dividend stocks. You'll recall I said that last Thursday and Friday, the market went up 3.75% in between Thursday and Friday, and it did. But the 5 days prior to that, which would have been the Thursday, Friday, Monday was a holiday. So it was Thursday, Friday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Those 4 consecutive days, the market fell 6%. So for the week ended last week, the entire market after the 2 huge gains on last Thursday and Friday was up a giant 36 points, which is 0.8%. So your portfolio should have returned like $800. They didn't. Top 30 cap weighted returned 350. Top 30 equal weighted lost $30, and top 3 every sector returned 500 out of the 800. If you look at the stocks, what were there? There's 57 we follow, 32 were up, 22 were down. 3 stocks went up more than 5%, and that's Adobe, Chevron, and Intel. 3 stocks went up more than 4, but less than 5. NextEra Energy and Abbott Laboratories, basically in that group. 4 stocks went up more than 3, but less than 4. Honeywell, Microsoft, Google, that's it, and then a real estate concern. 5 stocks went up more than 2, but less than 3. Kinder Morgan, oil pipeline services company that had that big methane leak, which is why their stock went down. They pay a good dividend. That's one of the stocks that I would consider owning. Couple of more real estate and industrials concern. NVIDIA and Facebook were up more than 2%, but less than 3. 7 stocks up more than 1, but less than 2. ConocoPhillips, 3M Company, Johnson & Johnson, Berkshire Hathaway, and Broadcom. 10 stocks up, but less than 1%. Costco, Comcast is what it is. Comcast, Amazon, ExxonMobil, Verizon, Coca-Cola, Duke Energy, UPS, and AT&T were all up, but less than 1%. Stocks that fell, but less than 1%: Netflix, MasterCard, Sherwin-Williams. 8 stocks fell more than 1%, but less than 2: Procter & Gamble, Walmart, Disney, Apple, Verizon, Lowe's, Pfizer. 6 stocks fell in between 2 and 3%: Lynn, Costco, Bank America Corporation, Target, PayPal, JP Morgan Chase, and Nike. And then 4 stocks were down more than 3%, and that would be Boeing Aircraft down 3.7%. That one is just trading sentiment. They haven't sold a plane in 2 years because they can't get one in the air after those crashes. Tesla was down another 5.5%. Philip Morris was down 5.7%, essentially because it's a good dividend-paying stock, tremendous cash flow, but in the first 3 or 4, over January of 2022, the price went up quite a bit. So the price is slacking off as some people sold that and moved into riskier assets. That's another very good dividend stock. And then Home Depot fell 8.7%, and that's just the management over there, depending on the CEO talks too much. And sometimes he talks his stock down, and he did last week, down 8.7%. In terms of assets, dividend-paying stocks, we have a hugely dangerous situation in Eastern Europe here. Hugely dangerous. All right, we have a guy who turns out not to be a very effective general that's backed himself into a nuclear corner. Our politicians are like rabid dog crazy. I mean, you saw that map of NATO expansion. There's no reason for it. All right, the Soviet Union collapsed in 1992. It's like this military bureaucracy that wants to ensure its own survival. And so it keeps expanding. And you got a guy over there that's hugely vulnerable, stuck in the mud, backed himself into a nuclear corner, and we don't know enough not to stop pushing. And it has to resolve itself. I see no good resolution. Obviously some kind of broad exchange with the West is the worst possible, but the best possible is they just forget this winning hearts and minds nonsense and start killing large numbers of Ukrainians, taking cities and secure the ground in between the Dnieper River and the eastern border and get rid of the government. But one of those things has to happen. And when it does, I don't expect that the market reaction will be pretty. So I would be very nervous about all this and hope I'm wrong. Really do. But as of yet, I don't see it. Remember to look at those refugee pictures. Tell me where the men are in between 20 and 60. Don't believe, you can't believe anything you read in the press. It's just all nonsense right now. Anything medical is censored. Anything national security or foreign, anything to do with Ukraine is censored. So it's tough. Anyway, and join me next Tuesday for a cheery little, update on what's going. I'm honest, at least. There's problems. It doesn't do any good just to paper them over and not acknowledge them. But join me next Tuesday, the Bogdanich Perspective, Talkcast PDX, Doviđenja. It's Croatian, not Russian or Ukrainian, but it means goodbye.